Good evening, folks. I'm going to do a little video before I go to bed. Um, this is in reply to, I wasn't planning on doing this at first, but I figured I didn't want to totally let it go. There's a saying that you should always let sleeping dogs lie, and I seem to have a problem with that. Anyways, earlier this evening, TGV posted a video. TGV at the Urban Gentry channel posted a video which was pretty much a rant against Jeffrey McMahon and myself, and some views that we had stated, or at least that he has. Uh, he thinks we had stated. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding and mischaracterization going on, which is part of the reason I'm doing this video. Um, but yeah, TGV, it was quite surprising actually. It was quite a little hostile, aggressive, with some insults thrown in. But we'll let that go. TGV, we'll let you off the hook this one time. um, but yeah, as I was saying, there's quite a lot of mischaracterizations, and to be honest, I think part of it is I don't think getting the sense I don't think TGV understands where I'm coming from. I don't think he understands what I was saying, or at least it's not living to him. It's not something that he feels in his being as being true, and that's fine. That's fine. Um, I think actually Purple Haze had some astute remarks about different worldviews and ideologies and how they correspond to different ages, phases of life, that sort of thing. So, and to some degree, I think TGV is probably reacting to something else that might really have nothing to do with me. And so there's a little bit of a straw man. So I won't take it personally. All right, I won't take it too personally. Anyways, I think the main mischaracterization that's going on is that it's really based on what even TGB admitted was his own black and white thinking. And his mischaracterization is that I'm somehow anti-capitalism. And I've had that waged at me before on YouTube, and I maybe even by TGV. I can't even remember. Maybe it's others. I don't remember. But this is part of this is you can see it in some of the things that he was saying that you he TGV was saying that, well, first of all, he couldn't differentiate between complaining and critiquing, and he was saying that we shouldn't question or complain about the status quo, which to me is, ironically enough, our country, this country, the United States, is based upon critiquing the status quo and revolting against the status quo. The Declaration of Independence states that it's the duty of the citizens to not accept tyranny and to overthrow it. So it seems odd that TGV is accusing me of. I mean, he was telling me to go to China or even to North Korea at one point. Very bombastic, I must say, TGV. Um, and and just falsely characterizing me as hating this country or hating capitalism and so forth. It's just not true. It's just not true. If you insist upon believing it's true, I can't do anything about that, TGV. But that's not how I see things. And I think part of it is maybe based upon your misunderstanding that we can both love something but have issues with it, right? It's called marriage. We can both. I have deep appreciation for some of the basic things that we take for granted living in the United States, living in the developed Western world, both in terms of our basic level of wealth. We're all rich people, basically. Um, if you live, unless you're like totally poor in this country, if you're vaguely middle class, you're extremely wealthy compared to 98% of the rest of the world's population. And part of that is because of the capitalist system, because we have this amazing system that allows us freedoms that are quite revolutionary in the history of humanity. Now, we're not the only country that has those freedoms. Much of Europe has many of those freedoms. They even have some things that we don't have in this country. Like they have real health care, right? I know they have problems too, and I don't want to get into that. Um, but yeah, there are some things that we are lacking in this country that some other developed countries are stronger in. But overall, it's an amazing place to live, and I wouldn't. There are some places I would live. I mean, I would live in Canada and some parts of Europe. Um, but I'm not anti-America. I don't want to leave. I don't want to, I'm not anti-capitalist. I'm not a Marxist. I think Karl Marx had some interesting observations and some important perspectives. I'm certainly not a communist. Um, I don't I don't want to live in China, although China's becoming less, it's becoming more like us in some ways. I certainly don't want to live in North Korea. Please don't send me to North Korea, TGV. Like Pierce Brosnan in one of those James Bond movies. Anyways, so yeah, I think it's our duty. I think we should critique. I think that's part of what, I mean, I've said this actually in some of my classes that I've taught high school students, that we need to appreciate the fact that we can have this conversation. We can question whether the United States is the greatest country in the world, and we're not going to be like, you know, the Gestapo is not going to barge through the door. That's an amazing thing, and we shouldn't take that for granted. So I appreciate this country. I appreciate capitalism. But I was actually making, I assume that, I don't know what you're referring to with Jeff. I think he did a video on social media and some things, and I'm not going to speak for him, um, but I assume with regards to me that you're reacting against some of the things I said in that walking ramble from a few days ago, where I was talking about consumerism and lack, right? And it seems like that's not antithetical to capitalism. Capitalism, it's I wasn't railing against the idea of capitalism. What I was doing, I was in a way I was talking about the misuse of it. But consumerism isn't quite the same thing as capitalism. I mean, they're related concepts, but they're not quite the same thing. And I'm specifically talking about the culture of consumerism and advertisement, and how it impacts the human psyche by encouraging the feeling of lack, right? That it makes false promises, and it's a surrogacy for deeper, real human experience. I think one of the classic example of this, and I think I mentioned this in that video, is there's an online virtual reality game or space called Second Life. And it's just so symbolic, such a great metaphor for what I'm talking about. I think the idea is that you create a persona or an avatar and you live in this virtual space and you have your own whole other life. It's your second life. And it's so clearly a surrogate for real experiences in this world. I mean, I'm not saying there's not a reason to have a second life, but usually if you have a second life, whether it's virtual reality or it's having affairs or whatever it is, it's you're not you're doing it because you're not getting something in your daily life that you want, maybe need. So now the thing is, the problem here is that in my opinion, each and every one of us has this emptiness within us, that it's actually, in some ways you could say, it's the nature of who we are, is this emptiness, this empty spaciousness. And we try to fill it. We try to fill it with experiences. We try to fill it with, we all find our own different combination of things. Some people fill it through sexual conquest. Some people fill it through food, through career, through money. There's so many different ways to fill. Some people fill it with philosophical ideas, right? Um, some people fill it through consuming. But none of it really works. None of it really fills the emptiness. Um, and my issue with consumerism is that it promises that it can fill that emptiness, and therefore what it ends up doing is it keeps it's like a cigarette, right? The only way to quit cigarettes is you actually have to eventually just stop smoking them, because every time you smoke a cigarette, you recreate the need for more nicotine in your system. So there's this emptiness that we all have, that we are really, when it comes down to it. And I would suggest that there's two ways that we can actually, quote unquote, satisfy the problem of our emptiness within. Um, the first way is that of creativity. And it corresponds to Abraham Maslow's self-actualization need in his hierarchy of needs. If you're not familiar with Maslow, he's really was a great thinker. His hierarchy of needs was very, it came, I think, in the early 60s, late 50s, somewhere around then. Um, and the basic idea is that our consciousness develops through these different needs. And that, it starts from the very basic survival needs, um, and then it moves towards more kind of social and emotional needs, like belonging needs, and then more self-oriented needs, like self-esteem, the need to achieve, and then it goes to these higher order needs. The first of which is self-actualization, the need to actualize one's own unique potentials. So that's the first way, and I'll come back to that in a moment. The second way is what we could call transcendence, or union. And this corresponds, Maslow actually adjusted his theory later on, and he added even a higher need than self-actualization, which we called self-transcendence. And this actually led to the development of what's called transpersonal psychology, which is a form of psychology that developed in the early 70s and is still existing today, that basically integrated psychology and spirituality, in particular Eastern spirituality, but also Western forms. But it recognized that human beings have kind of a deeper spiritual nature, that it's not just the old Freudian kind of like id, ego, superego, libidinal urges. We're not just behavior patterns like Skinner would have it, or Ned Beatty in Network was kind of a behaviorist. And it's not even just that we're existential beings like Maslow and humanism would have it, humanistic psychology. But so we have these two possibilities, and I think we need to be clear that self-actualization has nothing. Your unique potentials has nothing to do with how much you make, has nothing to do with your income, your social status, a lot of that has to do with self-esteem needs and physiological needs. Has nothing to do with sort of the traditional approach of going out to the world and making a lot of money, and that it could translate that way. So for instance, you could be like, I guess what I'm saying is that you can be self-actualized and be dirt poor and be deeply fulfilled, or you could be self-actualized and extremely wealthy. Maybe your potentials have to do with making a huge amount of money and creating amazing business structures that serve humanity, right? Um, there are actually some people that do that. Um, but it really has to do with something that's unique to you, something that only you can do. Your own, I mean, think of it this way, that we've had 14 billion years of evolution, so to speak, or and the universe has evolved towards this point where you exist, and it has created a unique channel for itself to express itself, and that is you. And your self-actualization has to do with unpacking and and engaging and expressing your own uniqueness in some form that's deeply meaningful to you. And it's different for all of us. That's what makes it so interesting. Um, so that's the one part. The other part is this union or transcendence, and this is traditionally relates to meditation, contemplation, um, opening one's sense of being to a larger, deeper self. And this is, I mean, it sounds mystical and it sounds kind of esoteric, like, oh, I couldn't do that. But it's actually something that we can all experience and that we all do experience in moments of our life. Um, and actually, nature is one way that it's relatively easy and common to have this kind of experience of transcendence or union. So what do I mean by transcendence? I mean transcending your limited sense of self. That you walk around in the world, you have your thought patterns, your self identity, you have your feelings, etc. And transcendence is a sense of being that moves beyond that limited self. So when you're walking in the woods, or this is an experience that I've had many times, um, I'm walking and my thoughts, my worries, my anxieties, stress, it just sort of falls away. And the boundary of myself with the world dissolves so that I am the woods. I am the entire experience. And it's this amazing sense of oneness and union. And it's a tremendous feeling of well-being and even kind of joy, not like hysteric joy, but just a sense of like, yes to existence. I am existence. Yes to myself. Um, and there's different variations of this, right? There's different variations, different kinds of experiences and flavors of this, but that's the gist of it. Um, it doesn't have to be nature, though. I mean, I've had this experience in airports, of all places, and I mention airports because it seems I'm particularly prone to it there because I don't know why. I think it's maybe because the airport is so almost opposite of that natural. It's so artificial, and maybe it's almost like a survival mechanism to feel one with the airport and the craziness of it. So we have these real avenues to experience um, ourselves more fully. You know, one of the things I said in one of my comments to TGV is that, in my view, that we're all kind of asking the question, what is it to be a human being? And we're all going to answer it differently. There's not a one size fits all. There have been contexts where there's been one size fits all, and those are called dictatorships, right? Or those are called fundamentalist religion, fundamentalism of any kind. One true wayism is an internet term. It's when there's one true way to do things, and that's black and white thinking. Like it's either this way or that way. You're either with us or you're against us. As George Bush said, you're either with us or you're with the terrorists. You remember that from about 12 years ago, 13 years ago, whenever it was after 9/11, but it's like I forget when he said it. But anyways, and God, that's not true. The world is much more complex, right? And there's so many different variations. Um, and I will defend Jeff here for a moment. I've known Jeff for a few years now, only through email and through blogging and that sort of thing. And we've never met in the flesh or in the metal, to use the watch vernacular. And I consider him a friend. Um, and he's some people don't get his humor and his his style. And um, now, Jeff, if you're watching this, feel free to disagree with what I'm saying. I hope I don't mischaracterize you here and be an instant of my own complaint. But I see Jeff as he's got a comedic approach that's in the style of Woody Allen or Mark Maron or Louis C.K. And what that is that he shares his vulnerability and his neuroses, and he makes a joke out of it. He makes fun of it in a way. There's self-deprecation. He accentuates it. He exaggerates it, um, and he makes it almost um, palatable. And I imagine to some degree it's a coping mechanism. And I think of someone like Louis C.K., who everyone loves. I mean, Louis C.K. might be my favorite comedian of all time. Um, Louis C.K., he's dumpy and middle-aged, and he's struggles with being a father and his eating issues, masturbation, excessive masturbation, that sort of thing. And people love him. He says these crazy things, and it's disgusting and it's just ridiculous, but people love it. And I think the reason people love him is that we can all relate, right? We see ourselves in that. We see our own vulnerabilities, our own warts, our own imperfections. And so it's a great gift that Louis C.K. brings to us by sharing, by like just letting it all out. And I think Jeff does a lot of that himself on YouTube, no less. So the idea of him being criticized for that bothers me, because it's a kind of vulnerability that he's bringing, but it's also a gift. It's a sharing, and don't take it too seriously. Like it, a lot of it's just humor, but it's that kind of humor, like Woody Allen or like Louis C.K., that it's true and humorous, right? So the reason I bring that up is that there's a tendency, and I think, not to sound ageist, but when you're in your 20s and maybe into your 30s, especially if you're a male, but actually men and women have their own versions of this. There's this kind of feeling that we need to be perfect, that we can't be vulnerable, we can't have issues, we can't be fat, or we can't be incapable, we can't be not accomplished, we can't be poor, you know what I mean? It's like this big ego thing, and some of us, like, hopefully you start getting a sense of, oh, wait, I've got a shadow side too. This is a basic psychological principle. I have a shadow. I have part of me that I can't see, but I see it in the world. I mean, one of the ways to get a sense of your own shadow, do you have the same kind of experiences with spouses or girlfriends or boyfriends again and again and again, and there's only one common denominator, and that's you? Or the same situations with people socially? Do you end up in the same kind of awkwardness with people, or do you end up with the same kind of conflicts? I'm not talking to anyone in particular. I'm talking to all of us. Um, we have this part of us, just psychologically. None of us see ourselves fully. If somebody thinks they don't have a shadow, those are the really dangerous people, because it means that they're so far from recognizing that they have this other aspect of themselves. And then that means the shadow can just act through them. They just act out. I mean, this is what a psychopath is in a sense. So, yeah, I think that as we age, as we develop, we become more aware, at least, that we have this part of ourselves, even if we can't see it at first. Um, and also that the other part of it, and what's more important, I think, here, is that it's okay that we're not perfect. It's okay that we have warts, that we're dumpy and middle-aged and overweight, or we're awkward and young and don't know who we are, right? That's all part of the process. Um, I actually have I guess you could call it my ideology, or you could call it my worldview. And it's not as much like something that I deeply believe in, but it's a myth, a story that makes sense to me. And it has to do with something I said before, that um, I'm pretty agnostic. I'm not an atheist. I'm more of a, I'm a little, I've got some pantheism going on. Um, but I do think, I'm always interested in finding perspectives on existence that aren't factual or false, but have almost a mythic truth to them. And it's like a perspective that allows us to be more fully alive through considering it even. And one of the things that but it's not something that requires believing, right? It's true without needing to believe it. So one of the things that has come to me is that, however, as far as the scientific view holds that the universe is 13.8 billion years old, and this is always changing, it's always going up and down, and it could be much older, it could be less old. The Big Bang Theory is disputed by some, but let's just assume that that's basically true. That's roughly 13.8, 14 billion years old, and that the universe has been around for 14 billion years, and it's taken 14 billion years to create this. Everything you see around you is the result of 14 billion years, including you, right? We're all the result of 14 billion years of cosmic evolution. And the cosmos, the universe, reality has created all of us. And here we are. And we get to be who we are. And the thing is, if you think about it, the universe has created all of this. It's generated this vast diversity. And every single part of the universe is unique. Even the most monotone things, a million Rolex Submariners are made, and they're all slightly different, even just on a very small scale. Everything is unique. You are unique. I am unique. And we get to be that uniqueness. And the universe wants it. I'm not saying it wants it like a human being wants sex or food or whatever. But maybe it's kind of like that, actually. Maybe the universe wants to be us and all of us, right? It doesn't want me to be something other than what I am. It doesn't want me to be an idea I have in my mind of how I should be, right? We all have those ideas. We all have these ideas of, oh, if I had done this differently, oh, if I was a little bit more muscular. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't improve ourselves. We shouldn't master ourselves, so to speak. But that's an endless thing, right? There's no end to potential mastery. You're never going to get to the point where you've mastered everything, where you're a master of the universe, a master of your own domain. I mean, that's about the best you can do, is become a master of your own domain. Create a little domain and have some mastery. But in a way, true mastery is like almost needing not to be the master of yourself, right? It's not being dull about it, but it's letting go a little bit and letting yourself be who you are at whatever stage you are, right? Wherever you are in your path, your development. If you're 24 years old and you're just starting to get a glimmer of who you are, that's perfect. That's just where you need to be. Or if you're 50 years old and you still are questioning who you are, why not? Why do we have to? The universe creates diversity and it wants us to experience our own uniqueness, and that's where we're at, And I would think that I mean, this is why this is kind of underlying my philosophy on watch collecting. That in the end, the tiers don't matter. In the end, the price tag doesn't matter. What matters is that you wear and buy and enjoy the watches that you love. It doesn't matter what the brand name is. It really doesn't. I mean, in the ultimate sense of things, what matters is that you're happy with it. And that's the same thing with our lives. And even if part of our quote unquote happiness is to be unhappy, maybe that's what we want to be. Maybe on some deep level, we want to experience misery, right? Some people even believe that we actually, I think Alan Watts said that we're only not enlightened, quote unquote, because we don't want to be. We can do that later, right? There's a great movie um, called The Game, starring Michael Douglas. That it's really a profound psychological movie, and it's also very allegorical for spiritual development and awakening. And I recommend it. But Michael Douglas gets enraptured. He gets involved in this weird role playing game, and he's trying to figure out what it is. Like what's going on? Is it real? Is it not? And I think at some point, I can't remember who said it. They said to him that the object of the game is figuring out what the object of the game is. So yeah, I'll leave that as just a consideration. All right, good night, folks. Good evening, folks. I'm going to do a little video before I go to bed. Um, this is in reply to, I wasn't planning on doing this at first, but I figured I didn't want to totally let it go. There's a saying that you should always let sleeping dogs lie, and I seem to have a problem with that. Anyways, earlier this evening, TGV posted a video. TGV at the Urban Gentry channel posted a video which was pretty much a rant against Jeffrey McMahon and myself, and some views that we had stated, or at least that he has. Uh, he thinks we had stated. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding and mischaracterization going on, which is part of the reason I'm doing this video. Um, but yeah, TGV, it was quite surprising, and he was saying that we shouldn't question or complain about the status quo, which to me is, ironically enough, our country, this country, the United States, is based upon critiquing the status quo and revolting against the status quo. The Declaration of Independence states that it's the duty of the citizens to not accept tyranny and to overthrow it. So it seems odd that TGV is accusing me of I mean, he was telling me to go to China or even to North Korea at one point. Very bombastic, I must say, TGV. Um, and and just falsely characterizing me as hating this country or hating capitalism and so forth. It's just not true. It's just not true. If you insist upon believing it's rising, actually, is quite um, a little hostile, aggressive, with some insults thrown in. But we'll let that go. TGB, we'll let you off the hook this one time. um, but yeah, as I was saying, there's quite a lot of mischaracterizations, and to be honest, I think part of it is I don't think, getting the sense I don't think TGV understands where I'm coming from. I don't think he understands what I was saying, or at least it's not living to him. It's not something that he feels and as being true, and that's fine. That's fine. Um, I think actually Purple Haze had some astute remarks about different worldviews and ideologies and how they correspond to different ages, phases of life, that sort of thing. So, and to some degree, I think TGV is probably true. I can't do anything about that TGV, but that's not how I see things. And I think part of it is maybe based upon your misunderstanding that we can both love something but have issues with it, right? It's called marriage. We can both. I have deep appreciation for some of the basic things that we take for granted living in the United States, living in the developed Western world, both in terms of our basic level of wealth. We're all rich people, basically. Um, if you live, unless you're like totally poor in this country, if you're vaguely middle class, you're extremely wealthy compared to 98% of the rest of the world's population, and reacting to something else that might really have nothing to do with me. And so there's a little bit of a straw man. So I won't take it personally. All right, I won't take it too personally. Anyways, I think the main mischaracterization that's going on is that it's really based on what even TGV admitted was his own black and white thinking. And his mischaracterization is that I'm somehow anti-capitalism. And I've had that waged at me before on YouTube, and maybe even by TGV. I can't even remember. Maybe it's others. I don't remember. But this is part of this is you can see it in some of the things that he was saying that TGV was saying that, well, first of all, he couldn't differentiate between complaining and